Which side are you going?
I guess I'll go over here.
We've got waters too.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks Tushar. My name's Teddy Collins. I'm the EVP of Finance and happy longtime TeamOhana customer. And so got two kind of, great CFOs here with kind of long storied histories across operations and other verticals. First, we've got Ben Gammell, who's the CFO and President of Brex. And he kind of came in, kind of headed operations, then took over finance, then the go-to-market motion for tens of thousands of customers. So great to see there. And then before that, led operations at SoFi, and then various kind of investment positions, starting with Goldman Sachs. And similar theme, Marten also kind of got his start in the investment area and private equity, and then the CFO at Fundbox, which provided working capital solutions for small businesses, and most recently and currently CFO at Vercel, provides developer tools for folks to build and deploy and scale high performance AI apps. So thank you for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And I just kind of want to get started. Both your companies are AI native, so kind of on the cutting edge of AI. And kind of given your background in operations and finance, how does that kind of shape your vision on what AI can do for your company and specifically within the Office of Finance? Ben, I'd love for you to kick that off for us.
Sure, happy to. Well, firstly, unlike Marten, I don't have the luxury of being an AI native company, but we're going through that transformational shift as a company to become one. So we were started in 2017 by context, so existed far before, I should say, this recent AI wave. As we think about finance, I think that historically finance has been quite a reactive function and role where we're closing the books after the month closes, or we're chasing receipts of payments that have already gone out. And I think with what we applied to at Brex from 2018 onwards was trying to create a sort of proactive motion within finance. So how do we embed sort of intelligence into workflows that finance professionals engage with, whether it's expenses, cards, payment flows in general, so that you can be a bit more on the front foot. I think AI for us is taking us a step further than that, which is how do you actually make it more predictive? So how can AI use the context, or the agents use the context in which it operates around your expense policy, how you think about workflows, to actually be able to proactively and predictively sort of resolve issues before they even become issues. So an example of this is we have an audit agent whereby that agent can go and summarize all the expenses for a company, can actually proactively suggest these are the repayments that should exist because they fall outside of your expense policy, and even take the step further of actually automating and actually taking action on that workflow. So you don't actually need a finance person in the loop for the sort of more mundane and execution-oriented aspects of the work. So that's how we think about it at Brex.
Yeah, so we don't sell into CFOs, we sell mostly into developers. So AI in the finance org at Vercel has been mostly around improving internal workflows. So just a couple of examples. We have an ASC 606 revenue recognition tool that we just built ourselves. You can take any contract, or any bulk uploaded contracts, plug it in there, and you sort of get a highlight of which are the contracts that have some weird special terms that you should make sure you address individually. And here are all the contracts that are super boilerplate, straightforward, and can just be recognized pro rata. So that's one tool that we have. We use it for BVA, so we connect into NetSuite and Stripe data. It's kind of like a B- quality, candidly, but it's pretty fast, right? So you can ask a quick question hey, what happened in this? What's the change in spend from this vendor to this vendor, month over month, or quarter over quarter, whatever, and you can get an answer really, really fast. So it helps sort of speed up the process and make data more accessible, sort of at the fingertips. We in the past were pretty dependent on help from our data team to run advanced SQL queries. So the data team actually built this. It's called internally D0. We have a tool called V0, so the D is for data, where you can now just write pretty complex SQL queries using an LLM and have that be run straight into our Snowflake database. So you're much less dependent on a sort of help from the data team to run more complex requests and workflows. So for us, it's just been making every individual in the team more efficient, ability to self-serve more. And as a result, I think we need slightly fewer people. But we're pretty far from, I think, the stage where you're no longer need anyone in finance and you can just have AI close the books for you and do everything. I think that will take some time.
We're of course biased.
But huge sort of efficiency improvements. So you might be able to do it with a slightly leaner team than in the past.
Yeah, I know, Marten, you said you don't kind of sell these applications outside of Vercel, but from everything you've described so far, I think you kind of maybe owe it to the world to release those.
I think there are actually some of them as case studies on our website, so you can go and download them there. They're free open source. But yeah, some of these other ones, I mean, you can just make them yourself. Like the ASC 606 one was I actually built the first version of it in prompting plain English language. It's going to sound like a huge sell for Vercel, but I literally went to V0, which is a Vercel product. I typed in what I wanted. I got a draft. It looked how I thought it would look, but then when you uploaded the contract, that output was not how I wanted it. So then I just asked it and I needed a couple of attempts because maybe I wasn't too crisp on exactly what I wanted. But then I did that, and now it spits out sort of the results the way I want it. But the revenue team on my accounting side, they actually built their own because they have a slightly different preference for how they want to have that information. And they just do it themselves. And I think that's the key unlock. In the past, even if you wanted to build some internal tools, you had to get engineering resources, and kind of difficult, especially working at a tech company where you want all your engineers working on stuff that's going to move the business forward. Asking them to build some revenue recognition tool for you is probably not going to be a super high priority. Whereas now you can just do it yourself and get pretty decent outputs.
Yeah, and I want to kind of stay on that topic for 1 second. You've already kind of described kind of going from 0 to 1, and kind of a lot of people have kind of built apps, experimented, got these different unlocks. But how do you take those apps and kind of bring them to scale on, hey, that might work for you, but the 50 or 100 different applications that are kind of all sprawling about? What kind of happens internally to validate and to use and to poke and to improve those applications?
Yes, I think we definitely have a surge in what we internally call small software, which is basically almost like individual use software. And that's sort of meant to improve the efficiency of any one individual. Then we do have some tools that are a little bit more centrally run. And there we have, real sort of, Okta security and that kind of stuff, making sure we're not sort of leaking information. And the difference between those two is do they have access to sort of underlying information? So if there's a connection to say a Snowflake database or NetSuite or Greenhouse or TeamOhana data or something that is more sensitive, then we tend to lock it down. If it is, you put it in an Excel sheet and you get it perhaps just some outputs from it, but you're not feeding sort of live information. We have much lower sort of security requirements for those types of instances. But boy, do we have a surge in tools that people use. And I even a personal example that I haven't built this yet, but all the people on my team have. I've never found a good to-do list that I like. I've tried everything, but I still sort of come back to pen and pencil. But I have all the people on my team that have sort of built their own ideal version of a to-do list that fits their workflow, as opposed to having to try to find some third-party tool that someone else decided on the workflow, and you're now adapting to that. And that's obviously super easy to do. It's like a database of sorts. You can have as many of those as you want in an organization.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to geek out about productivity tools, which is probably literally my favorite topic. But I want to get back over to Ben, and you serve kind of tens of thousands of kind of offices of finance. But I also know you're kind of a big proponent of kind of investing in bringing kind of early stage companies into your finance stack. Can you tell me a bit more about kind of your approach to your CFO finance stack?
Yeah, I think that a big part of this is really just trying to meet customers where they are. I think that there's a tension at play with any company that is providing an AI tool or platform externally to their customers about recognizing the audience you're speaking to. I think when we think about our like startup customers, smaller customers, like they're more technologically enabled, they're more technologically fluent. They will probably, especially if they've started within the last year or so, be sort of AI native. And so their propensity to adopt and really run with more sort of AI forward features and functionality is like just much, much higher. I think you have this sort of, there's a concept of crossing the chasm. There's sort of this longer tail of customers that are maybe a bit more established, have already pre-existing solutions or workflows that you're now having to sort of, help them evolve through that change. And for what we do is we recognize that like we think of AI as it needs to be the icing on the cake. And what I mean by that is, especially when you think about finance, like when you think about movements of money and the fact you still have to close your books and you have all these sort of processes in place that still need to pass muster, you need to make sure you just do those table stake things really, really well in a really reliable way that instills trust and confidence in your product. And I think once you've gotten that trust from the customer, you can then start to prompt them and sort of show them like, hey, there's a better way of doing this, or there's this other approach you could be taking, or here's how you can sort of move your company forward in terms of enabling them to move faster and focus on the things that matter, maybe less so on expenses and things on the back end. And that is a bit of an education journey though for us. Like honestly, for last week, I was having a conversation with a CFO who they are still in the mindset of they really like, say, personal liability cards, because like that for them just feels like, okay, these employees will care more about how they're spending if they feel like they are personally liable and they may not get reimbursed by their company. Brex, we're obviously biased, but we think that's like a relatively antiquated way of thinking, and that you actually should be able to, with the right controls in place, be able to move forward with more of a corporate liability and actually have your employees on a card. Just makes it easier for everyone on the back end. But like obviously if I'm talking to that CFO and I'm like, hey, here's all this AI things you could do automatically, and you would decentralize decision-making autonomy to these agents that you would program and you'd be able to verify, like that is so far away from where they currently are in their journey that would fall on deaf ears. And so I think for us, the way we try to do it is like, we want to be as on the leading edge as our customers that are very AI native. For example, like Anthropic is a customer of Brex. What we're beta testing with them is far more down the line of what agents could do from a finance professional perspective than what, if you're a Fortune 500 company on Brex and maybe you're a more established business and you're maybe sort of a little slower to adopt. So really just tailoring it for the audience.
It's good. I want to give a little plug to Brex, where we've been a customer at SeatGeek for a few years. And I think with the prior, pre-AI versions of the product, I think we were able, we've got a case study on the site where we've achieved like 99.7% GL account coding accuracy just with the, I think we built through like largely deterministic workflows, elegant structuring of kind of budgets and sub-budgets, and, intake flows, like routing things to the correct place. And I think one thing that AI has done since, soon after we launched the product, is kind of bring that knowledge and know-how to the organization, just automatically configure, and it's just there and it just works and gets to that 99% instead of having to be just an expert that knows everything about every end of the product.
Hopefully.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and then I want to go back to you, Marten, and just talk a bit more about the kind of culture around kind of learning and development, and kind of, let's say you've got a new hire coming in who may be coming from a larger company where they don't have this kind of robust environment for learning and launching apps. What do you kind of do structurally and organizationally to encourage this? Is it like, you mentioned the demo days, is it these time off hackathons? Like what's
for us
the special sauce?
Yeah, for us it even starts in the interviewing process. So we found interviews, this is not going to be particularly revolutionary, to be relatively low signal. Some people are good at interviewing and terrible employees and vice versa. So we always have like a case study as part of an interview. And I think in the past, that used to be like a modeling exercise in Excel, or like you have to create some slides. And we're increasingly asking people to experiment using something in V0 to actually build an application of sorts as part of their interviewing cycle. And most people have this their first time using V0. So you can get a sense for like, are they able, willing to sort of experiment? And you don't need to know any coding. It's just, you kind of got to do some trial and error and figure out how to do some good prompting. But it really starts with that. So even to get hired, you must sort of be able to demonstrate that you can use some of these tools. And then after you start, I think we're, even have like channels, Vercel called like a kudos channel, where you sort of give credit to people. And we have a monthly team meeting where we try to have people showcase some stuff that they've built. We're very big on automation, very big on experimentation. We even talk about this internally, like we want people to get sort of speeding tickets, not parking tickets. Move really fast, push boundaries, experiment and try new stuff, and you're not going to get in trouble if something like doesn't quite work. You will get in trouble if you don't experiment or innovate. We don't want to have that type of a culture. So like, what does that mean from a culture perspective? Like, we're not afraid. I think it's like a very big one. There's no, I like tried something and it didn't work. It's almost like a failed founder. That's like a status symbol almost. That you've sort of been out there and tried to build something, and you're going to try again to build something else.
Yeah.
I think to jump onto what Martin's saying, I do think that creating an environment where experimentation is encouraged and is able to be done at scale, I think is super important. So we created like a platform, like an agent platform that any employee can go to, and in a relatively controlled way, they can build agents. There's prompt engineering, multimodal testing, evaluation frameworks, and they can really just like start to play around with the data that Brex has, or like what we're doing, and know it's in like a contained way, that they're not worried about sort of, you've signed up to some AI platform or tool externally, and then either Brex or our customer data is just like out into the wild. And so I think having a sort of almost a sandbox environment, which this essentially is, to enable employees just to like geek out and spend time just like iterating on problems they're facing, and they can do it in like a relatively unstructured way, I think has been really helpful. And definitely on the hiring side as well, I think we're almost going so far as to structuring our interviews that there are certain elements you can't do if you don't use AI. And it's not that you have to be like AI fluent and be sort of really progressed in your journey on and familiarity with these different tools and platforms, but more like there's a certain degree of intellectual curiosity you need to be able to demonstrate, and in those sort of hiring frameworks, like show that you're actually capable of thinking about, okay, how can I do from a blank sort of sheet of paper, essentially, how can I get to an end outcome?
Yeah, and just tell me a bit more about the adoption. Who you describe this platform, the agents and building, but like let's just say within finance, like what percentage of your org is like actually, is this like an 80-20 rule where a small number of people are like doing most of the development and people are kind of getting the benefits of that? Like how do you teach people in a more kind of structured way to take advantage of this?
Yeah, I think finance actually, ironically, even though we're a sort of a company sort of aimed at bringing AI to finance professionals, we were actually relatively slow to adopt, because I think for a lot of people, it was just like getting started was like the inertia we had to overcome. I think if you're in a more technical field, so engineering and others, design, you maybe have more sort of fluency in terms of just like starting with a new tool. I think in finance, it's maybe just like less part of the job day to day. And so a big part for us was just sort of saying to people like, hey, just go spend time, like use a hackathon, like use a demo day to actually really just play around with something without there necessarily having to be a deliverable that you are on some deadline or time pressure to meet, so that people could just start to get used to engaging with these platforms and these tools. And so I think for us, it was just around getting people comfortable with starting to like use this other mechanism or tool to get their work done. And then, I would say creativity abounds from there, because as they get more familiar about where does different sort of agentic workflows help or hinder, they can start to know when to deploy it. So the AS606 kind of example is we actually have most of our sort of agentic workflow from the finance perspective is actually built by, I would say, like our more entry level, like junior level folk, because they're the ones that probably get most exposed to tasks or workflows that can be automatable, can be improved upon with AI. And the more senior you go, maybe it becomes a little bit more challenging, because suddenly you're thinking much more about, okay, well, how do I think about your overall annual plan, and how do I think about like the 3-year direction of your business, and what's the resource allocation? Like, sure, you can maybe like jam with ChatGPT and other sort of tools for that, but it may be harder for you to build a sort of an agent that does that on your behalf.
Mm-hmm. It's obviously our business, right? But I think everyone's expected to use these tools. I have someone from like my HR team here with me today. and because they were curious, and we also were TeamOhana customers. They're using V0. Like we have a quarterly recruiting review later today, and like the dashboards and sort of what we're going to go through is a V0. So you can like click around, and it's effectively like a relatively simplistic. I'm not sure how many prompts it actually took, but you can sort of a mini application specifically for this meeting. So as I was reviewing it last night in preparation, like you can navigate it and get the information that you wanted. So it's sort of been the way that we now use to communicate internally, is using these different applications. I think it was almost the expectation is that you always use some kind of AI tool to help your job, be easier. And our CTO has this like famous saying, which he said on stage for a few different presentations, is like ask your employees what you hate most about your job, and like the answer to that is what you should build. And yeah, so said at our level, maybe slightly less manual work. So we might not be the best people to come up with ideas. But if you ask the people that actually day in and day out perhaps do sort of very repetitive, mundane work, we can have a pretty good list for you of some stuff that can probably be automated using an agent, or at least improved by building some kind of special interface for you to interact with.
Yeah, so definitely hearing a lot of efficiency gains, automation, make things operationally easier. But what kind of gets you excited about what could be coming up and be enabled over the next 2 or 3 years? Where are we headed?
Yeah, so I think for me, we have this framework internally, which is like deterministic and non-deterministic workflows, and simple and complex. And we've basically done a pretty good job in 3 out of the 4 quadrants. The one we haven't quite, and this is not Vercel, I think this is like the world, haven't quite captured yet is non-deterministic and complex. So like, why did churn increase last month, or why did signups improve? Where you're not asking a specific answer to like, was this above or below targets, or is this in policy, or can you draft me like a standard template NDA, right? You have to dig into different systems. You don't even know where to even look for the answer, and it's not even a specific answer. You have to look for multiple things, and how does even the AI know when to stop searching, that they've sort of reached the end of potential solutions? So as I think about what could be improvements coming, and ChatGPT has really only been around like 2.5-ish years since 3.5 came out, and we've seen tremendous improvements in those 2.5 years. Imagine what would happen in another 2.5 years. I think we're just going to see exponential improvements in these models and capabilities. So I think really good non-deterministic complex workflows, I think would be a sort of a game changer for finance teams to provide insights to the rest of the organization.
Yeah, I really like that kind of saying of like the human brain literally cannot comprehend an exponential function. And I can just see that from kind of 2-3 years ago, even kind of 6-7 months ago, from within SeatGeek having kind of no internally developed AI for the Office of Finance. Now we have kind of 9-10 agents kind of building a new one every week or so. And then I think our first experience with AI was actually with Brex and with the AI assistant, and kind of seeing kind of that operational leverage that you can get when the agent can go out and kind of look at that anomaly and kind of reach out to the person. So we've been able to, I think, at least keep headcount closer to constant the last few years from a G&A perspective, as kind of the business keeps getting bigger.
I think to echo your point, Marten, I think one of the things that I'm really interested to see is how can AI get to a place with the right structured data sets and such that it can answer those more amorphous prompt questions, which I think like what hopefully finance and people can still do better than AI in the fullness of time is like knowing what questions to ask. Like what is the thing that you need to know about your business to make decisions, and having that kind of innate sense. So like you may know, hey, like why is churn doing this, and like what should we do to drive this in a better direction? When I ask that of my team today, it's like, we'll have to go circle back. Like we're going to have to go look at the data. We're going to have to go spend time and cycles to understand like the full root cause of this issue to then come back with a proposal. And if AI is able to sort of speed up those cycle times, I think that would be a huge unlock for sure.
It is like asking the questions to ask, but also to quality check the answer.
Yeah.
Right. Like my doctor told me that she's allowed to use ChatGPT to ask for medical advice, but I'm not, because she can look at the answer and say like, that is just dead wrong. Yeah, it's hallucinating. You're not going to die in the next 45 minutes. Whereas if someone that does not sort of understand the business might ask, why is churn up? And it would just say, oh, there's more days in October than September. And you'd be like, well, that's definitely not the answer, right? But that could be something that the LLM would say.
Yeah.
So to be able to sort of know what questions to ask and also sort of sense check, does this answer actually make sense?
Yeah. So Ben, back to you. So thinking about zooming out to your finance stacks, you've got kind of a best of breed and kind of a lot of apps. You're also developing a lot internally. When you're out there looking to solve like a certain problem and you're looking at vendors, you're thinking about building it yourself internally. What are kind of that pros and cons list? Like what are you out and looking? How do you find out what's going to be that killer app that's going to help you?
Yeah, so I think for us, we have very much a build and buy mindset when it comes to all these tools and applications, because I think the way we think about it is like, where do we believe we can drive the greatest amount of ROI as it relates to like what we should be building internally? So when we think about that, for example, we decided to automate our onboarding flow for customers. And that was something that we were like, okay, if we sort of combine our know your customer workflow and model with our underwriting credit model, we can have a better customer experience because we can more seamlessly ingest both the structured data of the application flow, but also behavioral and risk signals to be able to automate a lot of the onboarding that our customers go through. So that was like something we decided to build internally because it's so unique to us and it leverages so much of our own data to be able to sort of create a better customer experience that we're like, we have to build this ourselves. It would be very hard for us to outsource that or buy a product that otherwise has that capability. On the flip side, when we think about, say, our customer service agents, like we use Sierra AI. We've done a really deep integration with them, and they are now sort of through Sierra AI's product and the integration with Brex, they now handle most of our inbound sort of customer service cases. And so from that perspective, like that was something that we're like, look, we can obviously surface up to them the detail and the context that they need to have the agent respond on our behalf, but that isn't some sort of the actual customer service agent in and of itself. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that like Brex uniquely builds because we actually think that there are other people who are like, that's their entire business model and they're probably better set up to do so based on not just Brex's instance, but they'll obviously have customers in other industries and other customers in general that they will be able to feed into a better product experience for that agent. And so I think, on the finance side specifically, there is some platforms that we use, so for example, use Numeric that helps us with our BVA and like cash flux analysis that we do every month. We feel like that's a pretty good tool for us to have bought by virtue of its integration with NetSuite, and just like it's something that we didn't feel we had a unique ability to sort of build it in a better way. So we're like, let's use that other tool, because whilst the tools, and to your point about like small software, while a lot of these tools and agents are very easy to build, you also have to a certain extent, maintain them, and you have to make sure that they're kept up to date and that they continue to advance. And so I think when you think about which sort of systems to build yourself, there is also an inherent tax to that because you're supporting it, which is, and obviously if you buy a tool, there's an inherent cost of paying a vendor on an ongoing basis. But one of the things that I would say we've made historically, Brex we grew up in the sort of zero interest rate period. We also were zero income as well. We just decided to build everything. We're like, oh, we can build everything. Cash is free. Like, let's just go out and go crazy. And then what we sort of have learned over the years is like, we actually need to be much more intentional about where do we believe we're uniquely positioned to do a better job building this versus going to an outside party because of all those other costs that are incurred.
Yeah, as I said, we like to build stuff. We also recognize when there are pre-existing tools that are really good. So like for legal, we use like GCAI. We didn't feel the need to sort of reinvent the wheel for something that is sort of specifically trained on legal stuff. We do also it's really good integrations like with existing system of records. So for like Ironclad, for example, we use Ironclad AI. And like we just I've done 2 fundraisers at Vercel. And like the first time around, we got like some questions from the investors of like, how many of your contracts are, in the event of an M&A, like they don't roll over. And we had to literally hire a law firm to like go through every single customer contract and give us that number. Probably cost us $50,000 or something like that. And with Ironclad AI, it was just a prompt. And it created a list of the customers where they have the right to end the contract in the event of M&A. So that went from like a huge pain and was like over a weekend, poor associates at this law firm, to like a quick prompt of all of the data. Now there's some work put into that, right? We got to make sure all the contracts are in Ironclad and stuff. But if the AI works like really well with the underlying data, then that's also worth it.
That just reminded me, just flashbacks of the same exercise that I've done in other various financings and that tagging and the hundreds and hundreds of
They asked us a follow-up question after we had done it, which was like, and how many of them have like a non-standard payment terms? And we just said we're not going to answer that, which would have been another easy prompt on Iron.
Oversubscribed, so it's like
I will say, investor due diligence is it's so much easier now with AI. Because especially if you've gone like really deep with one investor and they've asked you like more or less the universe of questions, you'll get almost like the same flavor of questions, but maybe framed slightly differently or phrased slightly differently from other investors. And your ability to just like create a central repository of all your due diligence materials and then actually just have AI write the first responses is kind of remarkable.
So we're pretty acquisitive. So we do a bunch of corp dev, and it's not like they're like particularly sophisticated data rooms at our scale where we acquire companies, but it's usually like an investor presentation, some kind of Excel sheet with some stuff, some employee data. And we built little bots that would basically just like review data room and give us the output on one page that we then look at when we discuss the deal in our weekly M&A meeting. So it's just stuff like that where you can, as a consequence, have time to look at more deals simultaneously and make it really easy for people that sit on the M&A committee to be like, oh, we should look at this. I read the one pager, not interesting, let's move on. So kind of another use case of like how to be more efficient.
For sure.
Very cool. I do want to kind of give an early plug. In a couple minutes, we're going to open up to audience questions. So kind of think, and we'll definitely circle back. And back to you, Marten. We're all kind of private companies, hopefully for now, up here. Can you build kind of ASC 606 app, like other, as you think about kind of like SOX compliance and going to your audit committee meeting, and like you did what with your contract, and then how do you prove and kind of represent, like how are you building comfort around controls and audit?
It's definitely a tough topic. We're actually working directly with Deloitte to make sure that they are okay with like, we still, while we make life easier for ourselves, we still do manual review of these contracts, right? But we're getting feedback from auditors, so like what is an appropriate use of AI in this process and what is not. So hopefully that the field of auditing will also evolve in the AI age, but candidly we're not quite there yet, right? So there's still manual reviews involved. We just use the tools to make life easier for ourselves, not to completely automate the workflow.
Yeah, not that I'm trying to make a plug for Deloitte necessarily, but I think like having an upfront conversation with your auditors to understand their appetite and their sort of comfort level around your use of the tools, I think was actually one of the reasons we went with Deloitte as our auditor, because we felt like they were, at least to how they articulated to us, and we've experienced this going through an audit with them, like just a little bit more on the front foot about thinking about, okay, we are going to be using AI to help improve workflows and our finance work, like making sure that wasn't just like a non-starter for them, that our audit work would almost be the thing that would hamstring our ability to move forward from a workflow perspective.
They want to say yes.
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that like, it's hard because, I mean, look, one of the things that's actually good from an AI perspective is like, if you think about it, finance, like there's a ton of rich data that underpin financial like information, and it's also relatively verifiable. Like if it's correct or not. And so in theory, AI should actually do really well in finance because you can tell it you were right, you were wrong, and it learns. So like there is a huge potential for AI from a finance perspective in my mind, but it's just getting people comfortable that there's maybe a little less visibility or a little less manual sort of, you can go and say to person X, hey, you messed up, or person Y, you messed up, because it's, you can't fire an agent, so to speak.
It is interesting because quality assurance is obviously an important part of a normal finance team, right? Some junior analyst did some work and, like senior manager will look at it and say like, that was wrong, you should redo it. But somehow if it's AI that does it, we trust it less than a kid straight out of college with no work experience. So I do think the world will evolve here as well. And it will be, the burden will be now on people actually reviewing the information, right? What tests have you done to ensure that what came out of the underlying foundation models is actually accurate and representative? And it might end up being similar to something what the auditors do, right? When they do sampling, so like you might be expected to do your own sampling based on like what the LLMs spit out.
Right now, so yeah, basically probably more augmentation, not replacing kind of humans still in the loop. So any kind of brave souls out there, any questions, please stand up in the front.
Hi, I'm Anju. we're one of Brex customer. Love it. Ben didn't pay me to say that, but okay. I would love to see what does this partnership of a CFO role and a Chief People Officer role look like, where the push and pulls, and then with the mix of AI in there, how do you see this relationship evolving? And I'm on the other side, I'm the Chief People Officer, so I'm curious to know from your perspective, how do you see this partnership at workplace?
So I will be the first to say that I think the CFO-CPO relationship is one of the most important relationships that you can have as an organization, because I think that you need to make sure that you're both on the same page and you kind of have each other's backs as it relates to like the organizational change you're trying to drive. I think that there's always going to be a sort of natural almost tension that exists between those organizations, because there's a bit of an element of, if you just be overly redundant, like finance people care about money and how much we're spending on certain things, and people officers can also care about like what's the employee experience, how we're setting up our employees for success. That obviously involves investments in learning and development and tools and access and systems that we set up for success. I think what I would say with our Chief People Officer, who's phenomenal, a woman by the name of Heather Dunn, is just really making sure that we have continued conversations about like what are our objectives, what are we trying to optimize for. We have weekly one-on-ones where we're like going through our teardown of like, here are all the big problems that we're trying to solve and work on them together. Because one of the things that I will say is that it is challenging for an employee base, especially so Brex, we're like a 1,200 person company, to go through this sort of quasi transformation, because you have a lot of people you've hired that maybe weren't as AI fluent, and now they're going through this organizational shift, and how do you make sure you can set them up for success? There's also like the lingering question in the back of a lot of people's minds about, does this mean role eliminations? Does this mean reductions in headcount? I think the way we've articulated it, and Brex is fortunate that we're growing so fast so that we are able to have this luxury, is we're saying like, hey, we don't anticipate this will lead to role reductions. It just means we'll be able to go further with the people we have on our staff today. And that's been a really helpful message that we've been able to articulate because, again, of the luxury and the position we're in. That may not necessarily be the case for all organizations, and I really respect that. And I think trying to have that sort of close partnership is really important so that you can be humane in all of this. Like everyone is going through this change, and I think making sure that a finance person isn't coming in like myself and saying, oh, we want to see 10% reduction in G&A arbitrarily because of AI operational improvements, like actually working through with the people person to determine like how feasible is that, on what time horizon, is that even like, is that even where our G&A costs are? Like, I mean, we're now a sort of an office first company. I can't make an office space agentic. I mean, I maybe theoretically could in terms of access controls, but like we still occupy a certain space. So like making sure you have a really good grasp and relationship around what are the true drivers of these costs and how to move them forward.
Yeah, we also work very closely, our head of people and myself, and we have way more problems than we have people to support said problems. So we look at everything like what is like the most urgent needs. How do we staff towards them, and what are areas where we can still make progress on things we'd like to work on and things we'd like to fix, and are there areas where we can, rather than hire 3 more people into this area, we can use AI to support them, have them be more efficient, and push the envelope sort of a little bit more on like around efficient teams. But yeah, it's not like we can say, oh, because of AI, we're not going to make like drastic cuts in the business. But I do think you can make efficiency improvements. So we spend a lot of time and energy on that and making sure that we sort of resource and staff the business correctly.
Great. Anyone else? I see someone. Tushar.
Yeah, that's me. I think all 3 of you are fairly well-funded companies. So when you think about AI, and I think, Brex, you've gone through many transformations, so would love to hear your thoughts on this as well. But how do you think about efficiency calculations or the ROI on each of these, whether internal or external tools that you want to implement and have your teams use? Is it a dollar number? Is it time savings?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is definitely a hard dynamic. And I think even before AI, when you would try to assess productivity, it was always a hard question for a CFO when someone was saying, hey, I'll get this new software and it will make us more productive. And you're like, okay, well, how are you quantifying that? Like, will it actually? And I think there's always been a little bit of a wariness on the finance side about productivity gain assumptions when making the decision to leverage a new software or a new tool. I do think there is something different about AI in general as it relates to it is, today, to Martin's point, really helping replace a lot of the more deterministic and more rote work that you can naturally say, okay, like, for example, I can easily say that our Sierra chatbot instance is saving us like 15,000 hours worth of like customer experience time over the course of a year by virtue of like the chat containment rate that we're seeing, the speed to resolution for our customers, and then doing the relatively simple math to understand, like, okay, this saves us X number of customer agents that we otherwise don't need to hire into as the company scales. I think that becomes a little bit harder to determine when it comes to like more on the engineering side, when you're looking at productivity tools like Cursor and others that a lot of our engineers are using, because I would say it's like, what's the measurement you do? It's not necessarily lines of code written, because that could also create somewhat perverse incentives. So you have really long code base versus like a more efficient one. So what we're looking at is like the rate of pull requests. So how like frequently are we seeing our engineers ship code as like a proxy metric to understanding like overall efficiency for our engineering team. But I think the proof will be in the pudding of like, do we actually find that we're increasing the product velocity overall? And that's something that we'll probably have to have a more of a sense for over a 6 or 12 month horizon. You're probably not going to get as much signal in the first month or so. And so just being, I would say, upfront with folk when they're looking at using tools or especially when they're looking at making a meaningful investment in a different AI platform or tool is, okay, what do you think success looks like? Like when you actually even just ask the question of like, how would you define success of using this tool? What is the outcome you want to see? At least gets the buyer in the mindset of like, okay, there is an outcome that we're expecting. And then we can see if it's a proxy metric or more directional sense in terms of Sierra, like, do we actually achieve that metric? And it's not necessarily to say like, if we miss it, like, that person is going to get like wrapped on the wrist, but it's more, okay, what was wrong in our assumptions going into that, and how can we learn about that for future sort of deployments of different tooling?
I think it should be pretty clear what is driving value or not. I'm just thinking of sort of a couple of examples on our end. When I first joined Vercel, we had like one lawyer and we had a massive external legal counsel bill, and then we started using GCAI, and which is not free, but it's not super expensive either. And suddenly our external counsel bill like dropped because we no longer needed to send a bunch of extra work to external counsel, because the easy stuff GCAI can do, so internal counsel can spend more of their time on value-added work. And the other one is we built an agent to review all of our inbound leads. If you like hit contact sales and you fill out the form, we used to have a 10-person team that would sort of like review that list. It would delete people that we just, scream obscenities at us, or sometimes there are people using it to like contact support instead. It's like, I have a question on this thing, my XYZ isn't working. And then once they sort of drill that list down into like actual leads, then they would spend time kind of what we call hydrating the lead of like, is this like a real business? What does their website infrastructure look like? Like, what are their needs? What geo are they in? And now all that stuff is automated. So we went from having 10 people for US inbound leads to one person, and the only thing this person does is to make sure that the deal bot is working. So this is like pretty clear, like obviously this is working. And we have a bunch of other things that are like probably not working quite as well. But when AI is working, like you don't need to do some like ROI analysis to assess is this working or not.
When you started thinking about Sierra, because there is or GC.ai, did you ask them to give you a guesstimate or some kind of a ROI calculator of sorts?
So we went through like an initial back test with them. So we basically said, like, we essentially had an upfront almost sort of test of, okay, if we were to run all these chats through Sierra, what was its efficacy in terms of getting to a resolution? And that was one of the reasons we went with Sierra over some of the other platforms that we were doing similar tests with, was just to understand what was our confidence interval that they would actually be able to resolve the case that was being chatted in. We then actually did a pilot period for about 3 months that we essentially wanted to see, okay, like how do we sort of expose, let's call it 5% of chats to Sierra and then 10%. And then as we were both getting confidence about the efficacy of it and that it wasn't going to cause a worse customer experience, and also that when it helped us better quantify, okay, this is the savings it could otherwise drive, and therefore the knowledge of the ROI up front was actually pretty easy for us to determine, even before sort of signing up to a more sort of established agreement that is now over 100% of our chat cases, for example.
So you believe that is that the model for bringing AI into the enterprise that you have to go through this try before long? And
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think you necessarily have to go through that. I think it's easier for sure if you have the ability to. What we're seeing with a lot of our enterprise customers is that pilots, I would say in general, and this is like one man's opinion, so like take it with a grain of salt, I think has like almost a 50-50 success rate. And what I mean by that is a pilot can either be really good if you have like a very defined, this is what the pilot's for, this is how we're going to be evaluated, this is what success looks like, and you align with your counterparty, whether it's your customer or your vendor, up front about what those look like, and then you work across the pilot towards that, and you get to the end with real signal to make a decision, either to buy or not. I think where pilots go horribly wrong is when you're very vague upfront about what does success look like, and you kind of just run a 3-month experimentation with a vendor or with a customer, and then you get to the end and you're like, well, wait, how do we even evaluate if we're happy with what the prior 3 months has achieved? And so from that perspective, I think that pilots can be a useful tool, whether it's to gain customers through saying, hey, we'll do a pilot with you, or as a buyer to say like, yes, we'll sign up for a pilot. I think it's just really important in either respect that you have a clear definition of what success looks like and make it quite targeted, so that at the end of that period, you actually can make a go, no-go decision.
So actually just thinking through this, so all of our sort of big customers for V0, which is our AI product today, I think all of them started as like a 10-seat account. And then it became like a 20-seat account, and then 50, and then 100, and then 800. And the few times you've done like, oh, they want to do like 1,000 trial seats for 3 months, and come back after 3 months and be like, well, it turns out that only like 60 people ended up using it. So like, we don't think this is for us. And like, it didn't work out. We've had much better success with these like gradual, but you get in there with like a group of people that actually want to use it, even if it is smaller. And then they hear, hey, do you hear what the team over in marketing are doing? They did this prototyping thing. Like, we should check that out. And then you get a few people from the design team, and then someone else hears about it. Like, you kind of get that like organic growth, as opposed to this like from the top push down, hey, you now have all a seat access to this thing, and then they sort of feel like the tools are being forced upon them, which has not really worked out at all for us, versus the bottoms up. Takes a little longer. NDR looks really good though, so like the finance person in you should like it.
Tushar, Maxwell, you have your go-to-market strategy calibrated now? You good?
Ready.
Okay.
We got all 3 of you there.
Land and expand.
The,
There you go.
the buyers.
And just kind of a time check. I know we're coming out. Do we want to end
We've
around?
got 10 minutes.
Okay, great.
Thinking about Sarah, by the way, and I'm a finance leader. I'm thinking about driving efficiency within FP&A. Some of the things that take us the longest time and add the most value is driving in identifying insights across the business. Also, as strategies change throughout the year, how do we pivot the business and what are the downstream impacts? Have you used anything in your companies to kind of identify those insights and or understand the downstream impacts to a strategic change across the company?
That's probably I talked earlier about complex non-deterministic workflows. That is like exactly it. The closest we've done is the ability to make it easier for people to sort of prompt our Snowflake database.
Yeah.
So that you can at least get access to information. You can experiment a little bit more with, what if I cut the data this way? What about this thing? But it's still, and I think of this as like the best part of like FP&A Strat Fin is when they think sort of strategically about the business and insights. So that's also probably one of the last things to be able to be truly replaced or even enhanced meaningfully by AI.
Would be ideal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can make it a little bit faster
Yeah,
today.
exactly.
And I actually just saw a demo of something called Concourse, which, it's basically it's middleware that connects all your different data sources, and then have an LLM on top of it that allows you to search, say, like Snowflake, Stripe, and a few other things, NetSuite. But it's still pretty early days for all these different things. But yeah, there's hope for the future.
I would say I really like to kind of geek out on kind of like the Gartner and Forrester type research. And at the Gartner CFO conference earlier this year, they did studies about that you can't really solve kind of the FP&A burnout issue through just like being more efficient and kind of getting automation. You need to kind of create these decision support tools like for folks so that they can use those tools, and then you don't like the FP&A business partner doesn't have to kind of be present for them when that decision's being made. So it's like, how can you kind of leverage the technology and kind of multiply yourself to make yourself available to the entire organization? And I think like for us internally at SeatGeek, we're a live entertainment ticketing company, and when we've had a lot of success with kind of rhythm of the business type use cases within AI, where, hey, that variance report like from Looker, from Tableau, that would say like, here is like our market share data, here's what the year-over-years look like, but kind of go out into the news and say, oh, player injury reports, like all these other factors to help kind of free up our resources so that we can build those decision support tools for folks, I think has been the unlock for us.
Yeah, awesome, thank you.
I'm going to stay up in the front.
Yeah, a question for you, Ben. You said use numeric for some EVA analysis. So do you have some examples of how a tool has been able to like use AI to do better analysis, maybe better than like Martin, you were saying, like churn that gives you days in the month, like really looking at maybe hiring happens sooner, faster, and later, or it was just timing from an event or trade show. So any examples of how it really works well for you?
Yeah, happy to. So I think it sounds like you've also built this internally, but essentially what it will be is like when we do our close and we're doing our flux analysis, Numeric has an integration with Ironclad, with NetSuite, and so it's able to use both of those contexts to understand like when we see variance to plan or variance month on month, you could like double click into a specific GL and understand what are the drivers of that GL change. Like, is it that like a certain vendor is now being billed that wasn't previously? Is it that your usage of a given vendor has now meaningfully shifted? And so that what I think helps us just really tighten in on is when you see BVA, it's like, okay, how much of this is like true favorability or unfavorability, or how much of this is timing? Like you can just get to that answer much faster. And so you can understand, okay, like this is what I actually think is part of, whether it's a flash or something, the explanation to the finance team and or me around like, okay, this is actually what we think is going on underneath the hood. I think when it comes to your point about sort of more rote work of finance, I think like our flash reporting is becoming like very much automated because it's like something that follows a pretty similar format month on month. I mean, I don't know if you would radically change your flash every month, that would be kind of crazy. So like AI is really good at that. It's like you have a predeterministic kind of format with information that's coming to it, and it actually is able to do a pretty good first pass at like, here's the flash. And then a human in the loop can then go and like correct wording and correct understandings of what's driving it.
Yeah, I think a high level flux, it can do super detailed real insights, not really.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then just kind of one other story. I know, just kind of talking with peers in the industry, kind of one approach I've seen is kind of get your budget data, get your GL data, get the procurement tool data into like one Snowflake kind of database, and then kind of unleash AI there. But then I've also seen like good use cases where you can go into all these tools that aren't necessarily triangulate. So basically like the budget information, trial balance information, and like some tools they can kind of just go deep flux analysis just on NetSuite data. But if, you have a big increase in marketing spend, if that was already a campaign in the budget, that's not as useful of information. So I think kind of that orchestration layer and kind of that single pane of glass across everything, no matter how, depending on how you structure your data to get there, is where I've seen some good results.
You gotta really love paying Snowflake invoices though, to put all your data from all your different sources in there.
You're paying it somewhere.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well,
in pain or
you don't pay for like a NetSuite query, right? Whereas you do pay for a Snowflake query. So.
Hi, Johnny from Blue Line. Question: have either any three of you incorporated AI as a decision tree when evaluating headcount requests and as part of your intake or backfill process?
Short answer, no, not yet. Any ideas?
No, I think very much I would say we haven't sort of relied on AI to, what we have done as part of that, because we've also done the hiring dynamic of like, okay, think through the interview loops, how do you make sure you're hiring people who are more AI oriented? One thing we've used AI as part of like the hiring process, less about whether or not from a headcount forecast or not perspective, is actually on the interview loop side, whereby you obviously have, let's call it half a dozen people plus who will interview a candidate. They all have their scorecards. They all talk about like the pros and cons of this candidate in their specific areas of domain. what we are doing, which I think is a little, what's the word that I want to use? It's a little archaic, but our CEO wants to do it, and our CPO is accommodating to it, and I'm also so, which is like our CEO and myself will actually sign off on every hire we make. We're also not hiring crazy amounts of people, so like it is possible, but I wouldn't necessarily say recommended necessarily. But what is helpful is we're using AI to basically go through all of the scorecard data of an interview candidate and then surface up to myself or our CEO, like, here are the areas of strength of this candidate, here are the areas of risks that were identified as part of the interview loop. These are some sort of considerations to have. And then at least that enables us to have a faster like look into a given candidate to understand like, okay, what are the areas that we maybe want to actually go in and read the actual notes on a specific area of strength or risk versus like, the pages upon pages of interview notes, which also I will say like we're obviously using AI tools as part of the interview loop as it relates to like just taking notes as you're interviewing candidates. And so that's really helpful because you're just getting more robust, more rich note taking for the reviewer of those notes, but also for the candidate experience is better because you're not having someone that's half paying attention because they're taking notes. They're actually able to engage more fluently with the candidate.
Basically all the same thing. So our CEO approves every single hire, and we do hire a lot of people, so that's sort of somewhat of a burden. Then we use Bright Hire in all the interviews to take notes. It's actually, not to plug Bright Hire, but like it also gives you feedback on yourself. Like how long is your longest monologue? What was the candidate to your speaking ratio? How many words per minute?
How do you score?
I'm like in the high 80s. But now that I sort of know the criteria, it's like you get bonus points if you set an agenda at the beginning of the interview. Is something I've never done before. But now to make sure I get a good score, I'm like, today we're going to talk about this. Which apparently the candidates also like. So
we're learning.
And shorter monologues. But yeah, so we use Bright Hire for that. And then we built our own little tool to take similar to all the scorecards and sort of come up with a summary for our CEO. And then he says no, and then we got to fight a little bit, and then we get the hire approved. I did see this actually on my report from the HR team written in V0 later today, 100% offer acceptance. So,
wow, congrats.
But that was not without a fight. There's always a little.
And at risk of saying this in front of a group of maybe people, maybe that means your offers are too high.
Sure. And confirm you don't ask them if they're going to accept before you offer it, right?
No.
Okay. Good stuff. So just a couple minutes left. Love to each of you kind of give kind of one wisdom looking back all the successes you've had on kind of reaching kind of AI at scale within your finance stack and operations. Kind of room of finance and HR professionals. Kind of one piece of advice.
I would say just start. Like just use it. And try to find the time in your busy schedules to use it and get more familiar with it, and not, to your point, Marten, earlier, like don't be fearful of it. Like don't fear failure, don't fear of like using it. I think that I actually was relatively slow to adopt AI at work because I was just like, I've got a million things to do. I've got back-to-back meetings. I've got like some deliverable I need to ship next week, and I just like, where am I going to find the time to like go and jam for like 3-4 hours on this tool? And so I think I was very slow to adopt in a way that I probably should have been faster. And I would say, had I done it all again, I would have been much quicker off the bat.
Yes, I think it's a cultural thing. So lead by example. You can even say, hey, I had an hour on the weekend. I like built this thing. It's probably terrible. I bet some of you that deal with this problem every single day and can commit a little bit more time to it can probably figure out to build a much better and more useful application than I did. But I'm experimenting with it. I'm trying it out. I don't think it's like too crazy to say that like AI is the future. So yeah, just have fun. Honestly, like it's not. It's easier to like be afraid of it because there's lots of new words and complexity, and but it just comes down to like it's almost easier than Microsoft Excel because you don't even need to do any formulas. You can just write plain English, and then you can say you did it wrong. Do this instead, and then it just does it. So you need some patience, maybe. But yeah, experiment and have some fun and learn. And then it doesn't work, and you have to ask to do the exact same thing again because somehow the machine started doing something completely different. You asked it to, change the location of a box, and it rewrote the entire application instead. Sometimes weird stuff happens. So be patient and have some fun.
Great, thanks. Marten, Ben, thank you. Let's get
Thank you all.
Thank you.